Real American with the latest world news, its reviews and analysis for you. And please subscribe to this channel if you like it. This channel is now on the YouTube and available to everyone.
Zionists particularly, who were against anything that was to be done if they couldn't have the whole of Palestine and everything handed to them on a silver plate so they wouldn't have to do anything. It couldn't be done. We had to take it in small doses. You can't move 5 or 6 million people out of a country and fill it up with 5 or 6 million more and expect both sets of them to be pleased. We had all sorts of objections to everything that was done. Something had to be done. We went ahead and done it and had it done, and now it's working out. Eventually, I think we'll have them all satisfied. But it's going to take a great deal of time yet to get the job done.
Could you tell us that they were worried about war with the Arabs?
To an end World War II. The decision by President Harry Truman to use the atomic bomb has been debated ever since. So how does it look 3/4 of a century later, especially from the vantage point of someone who was there on the ground? Harry Smith has our Sunday Spotlight.
Below 2,000 feet above the earth. Tens of thousands die instantly.
We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war.
3 days later, Nagasaki is the target, with a similar result. American Howard Kakita, then 7 years old, had been standing on the roof at his grandparents' home in Hiroshima. His grandmother insisted he come down.
If we stayed on that roof when the bomb exploded, we would have been burnt to a crisp. This is after the A-bomb.
Howard says one way to understand the horror of that day is to look at the numbers of American lives lost thus far.
The world learned that nuclear weapons should only be a deterrence, not a war-fighting weapon. Now it appears that many countries are considering that there might come a time when they would use a nuclear weapon.
While the U.S. and Russian stockpiles are shadows of their former selves, North Korea is believed to have 20 or more nukes, and Iran looks to be inching its way toward a nuclear weapon.
Do you think there's enough tension in the world, in certain places, that someone would make a purposefully wrong decision and use a nuclear weapon?
I hope not, Harry. I really hope not. I don't think actually there's any country that really wants a nuclear war, but I think through inadvertence or accident, you could see an escalation.
According to Israeli investigative journalists at 972 Plus magazine, Israel has been using an artificial intelligence machine called Lavender to identify thousands of potential Hamas targets in Gaza. The report says Israeli intelligence sources who served in the current war told how Lavender collects information on almost all the 2.3 million residents of the Gaza Strip through a system of mass surveillance, and on a scale of 1 to 100 gives a likelihood that each person is a member of the military wing of Hamas. Being in a WhatsApp group with a known militant, changing address frequently, or swapping phones every few months could all be factors in the machine determining potential targets to kill. The report claims that after October the 7th, Israel decided to move from targeting high-level Hamas figures to anyone regarded as in the organization, no matter how junior, and alleges that during the first stage of the war, when thousands were killed in a few weeks, the military allowed for 15 to 20 civilians to be killed as collateral damage per militant. In a system dubbed Where's Daddy, bombings often taking place when targets had been tracked to their family homes. At its peak, Lavender allegedly picked out 37,000 possible targets. In its development, it is claimed human checks on the targets selected by Lavender suggested it was accurate 90% of the time in picking out Hamas members. So in a campaign killing thousands, it was accepted that 1 in 10 targets were not Hamas. Lavender was allegedly wrongly picking police officers, civil defense workers, or relatives of militants. In a statement to Channel 4 News, the IDF denied using AI to identify targets and said, contrary to Hamas, the IDF is committed to international law and acts accordingly. They claim to make efforts to reduce harm to civilians and said that exceptional incidents undergo thorough examinations and investigations, and the process of identifying military targets in the IDF consists of various types of tools and methods. Well, earlier I spoke to the journalist Yuval Abraham, who wrote that article for Plus 972 magazine. The IDF have issued a statement saying the IDF does not use an artificial intelligence system that identifies terrorist operatives or tries to predict whether a person is a terrorist.
I read that out to one of the sources, and he burst out laughing. He said it's just not true. It's a lie. I mean, and if you look at, for example, in 2023, the IDF itself, one of the top commanders in the IDF, the head of the 8200 AI data center, gave a lecture in Tel Aviv University where he presented a machine that, quote, uses AI to identify terrorists. He was relating to 2021. So I don't know who wrote that response from the IDF, but it's clearly not true, based on their own statements in the past, and also based on what I've heard from numerous Israeli intelligence officers. The sources said that they knew there's a data science team that checked. They took a random sampling of this 37,000 and checked one by one. They realized that the machine is occasionally marking complete civilians or people who have a very loose relation to Hamas or something. The decision was made to authorize strikes based on this list without.
When those who are occupied refuse to submit, when they continue to resist, we drop all pretense of our civilizing mission and unleash, as in Gaza, an orgy of slaughter and destruction. We become drunk on violence. We kill with reckless ferocity. We become the beasts we accuse the oppressed of being. We expose the lie of our vaunted moral superiority. We expose the fundamental truth about Western civilization. We are the most ruthless and efficient killers on the planet. This alone is why we dominate the wretched of the earth. It has nothing to do with democracy or freedom or liberty. These are rights we never intend to grant to the oppressed. Honor, justice, compassion, and freedom are ideas that have no converts, Joseph Conrad reminds us. There are only people without knowing, understanding, or feelings who intoxicate themselves with words, repeat words, shout them out, imagining they believe them, without believing in anything else but profit, personal advantage, and their own satisfaction.
Dear citizens of America, here's some stuff that you really need to know. First of all, Jews make up less than 2% of the population of your country, but they hold every senior level cabinet position in the Biden administration except Secretary of Defense. I mean, just look at this list. And you have to ask yourself, are these people after your best interests? Are they going to do what's best for America, or are they going to do what's best for Israel? You see, the whole world knows the reality that Israel treats America like a farm. They treat you guys like cattle, like farm animals. Every single hardworking American works every day and pays their taxes. Those taxes are supposed to go to improving America and making the country better for you and your children. But instead, that money is sent overseas to Israel. America gives more aid to Israel than any other country. In 1999, the US government signed an MOU saying that they were going to pay a minimum of $2.67 billion annually for Israel for the next 10 years. That number was increased in 2009 and increased again in 2019, and now as a minimum, Israel gets $3.8 billion from the US every single year. That's $3.8 billion a year of your money, your tax money, that should be providing you with health care, should be providing you with a college education, but is not doing any of those things. Now, in addition to financial and military aid, the US also provides a lot of political support to Israel, as we've all seen. It used its veto power 42 times against resolutions condemning Israel. Now, the veto power was used a total of 83 times. 42 of those were used to protect Israel. That's more than half. So if I was an American, I would be asking myself, why am I living on this farm? Why am I allowing myself to work and sweat for my entire lifetime, as well as everyone I know and love, as well as all my children, just to send all of this money and support away to Israel.
This is what protest looks like in Detroit right now. No loudspeakers, but lots of flags and lots of listening. The People's Conference for Palestine, more than 3,000 activists in one place, carefully planning the next phase of a mass movement against Israel's war on Gaza. This area downstairs is effectively the heart of this conference. This is where people can come together, they can buy merchandise to support businesses, local businesses that support the people of Palestine, but also they can share ideas. We've got people here from all over the world. Those ideas are coming from up there. That's where the workshops are taking place, the plenaries, and all of the guest speakers, and there are lots of them. Working through dozens of topics. They're talking about Israeli weapons technology and the money behind it. Students on their own front line, as we've seen across the US over the last month. Relationships between Washington and Israel's didn't hear Hassan Abu Sitta, the British-Palestinian surgeon who spent 43 days treating Gaza's war wounded. Like many others, according to organizers, he couldn't get a visa in time. But those behind this conference are determined to go on and make a difference.
A wide range of people coming together in and of itself shows our commitment to continue to struggle until Palestine is free, and I think we're making that clear to Biden.
Old and young, one issue unites them, and they won't give up until the people of Gaza have peace. Phil Lavelle.
Hello, I'm Ted Pike, and this is my wife, Lynn. Today, a foreign government, Israel, operates the most powerful lobby in Congress. This is AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Through control of Congress, Israel demands and gets nearly $5 billion annually. No elected official dares criticize Israel for fear the Jewish lobby will accuse him of anti-Semitism, the kiss of death for any politician. The president also knows what Israel wants, Israel gets. To act otherwise is political suicide. The mass media, founded and controlled primarily by Jews, manipulates the spigot of information out of which heartland America drinks. The message of this contaminated source is, if you criticize Israel, you are anti-Semitic. Be safe, keep your head down, or you are fair game for being knocked off by the Zionist shooting gallery.
As a result, our president and elected officials are slaves to political correctness when it comes to Jews and Israel. They cannot seriously criticize Israel, especially as the source of Mideast strife and terrorism. They cannot suggest an end of aid to Israel. They cannot even protest Zionist control of Congress.
Let's think about what AIPAC is for a second. AIPAC is a group that largely represents the military and national interests of an entirely different country. Let's put this in perspective of another country. What if Iran was lobbying members of Congress, throwing a ton of money at rivals to anyone who was anti-Iran? What if it was China that was throwing a bunch of money at any candidate? If they were anti-China, they would fund a pro-China insurgent in some kind of primary race. What would the American people think? If that China is villainized to the United States people, so is Iran. This would be absurd. It would be all over mainstream media. How can we have this foreign interference in our elections? Their interests are not the same of the American people. This is insane. But when it's Israel and when it's AIPAC, we're like, yeah, it's fine. It's no big deal. It doesn't make sense.
An important point here is there's an Iranian American PAC. There are PACs that represent the interests of American citizens, but AIPAC specifically describes its mission as strengthening bipartisan support for the U.S.-Israel relationship. This is not a Jewish PAC. This isn't an Israeli-American PAC. It is a PAC that is fundamentally tasked with explicitly advancing the interests of Israel, another country. So I do think you highlighting that is really important. And it also needs to be noted, and this is what AOC was referencing in her tweet, that for decades now, it is difficult to attain office, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, if you're not willing to kiss the proverbial wing of this particular PAC. So the AIPAC conference, very notably, was attended by every presidential candidate, if I remember this correctly, up until Bernie in 2016, who declined to go to that speaking event. And it was a big deal, right? Because AIPAC has a very good track record of successfully electing the candidates that it supports, and you really are kind of putting a target on your back in terms of having fundraising against you if you are unwilling to support the AIPAC line with respect to Israel and Palestine.
There are Republicans who have feuded with AIPAC as well. We talked earlier this week, or maybe last week, about Representative Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, who got into it with AIPAC on Twitter over his vote not to endorse sending more funding to Israel.
Now, what did the Jews do? When you ask what have the Germans done to the Jews, you must always ask what have done the Jews to the Germans. Since 1850, when the Jews got all the political rights in Germany, in the German Reich, they have done three things which are really dramatic. Number one, they were a small minority of 2% of the population. At the time when Hitler came to power, 500,000 within 60 million German people. 500,000 among 60 million. They were a small minority. This small minority managed to control about 50% of the media, to give about 70% of all judges, to have a tremendous influence in movie and in theater, and in literature. They were overrepresented. This is one thing. They were absolutely overrepresented, as today in England, in France, and in the United States. Second, Jews were at the origin of a lot of catastrophic financial bank crashes in Germany between 1870 and 1920. In that time, they made a lot of crashes which have, this is all documented. I mean, it's not Nazi propaganda or anti-Semitic or Arab propaganda. It's a lot of books have been published, even by Jewish Germans, about this problem. They have millions of German fathers have lost their incomes, their fortune, their savings because of these Jewish gangsters, bank gangsters and speculations people. Then the third point, which was psychologically the most dangerous of all, they have introduced into German art and culture and theater and movie decadence, immorality. The first homosexual theaters, plays, were made in Berlin in the 1920s. The first adultery theater plays were made in the 1880s and 1890s, 100 years ago, by Jewish authors. Adultery, then sexual perversions of all sorts, sadism, masochism, a lot of homosexuality, all these things, and then decadent art, you know, an art which is absolutely ridiculous, so-called modern art. It was all pushed by Jewish intellectuals, and this created among the German people a big revolt. And they wrote books ridiculing Christianity, ridiculing Jesus. I mean, it was something like Salman Rushdie with